Hello, good evening. Thank you so much for coming to our parent education night. We'd like to call it a series, but so far this is our only one this year. But if you have ideas, we can make it a series for a spring event as well. My name is Jane Dickerson. I'm one of the co-presidents of Parent Club, along with Wellner. And we wanted to do an encore of last year's parent education event because it was so very well received, and we thought we could do a better job advertising and making sure the school knew what a great resource we have in our own community. So we're very excited to have back with us tonight Betty Peralta. Betty is a parent education, well, we know her personally through our parent education network as part of our co-op years and years ago, but Betty has experience in counseling, a master's in teaching, and has been studying the neuro-relational framework, which she's going to share with us tonight, focusing on behaviors as stress response. And before I turn it over, I'll just take the moment to also say our next Parent Club event is November 28th. It's a fundraising event in the University Village. So if you shop at Ever Eve, or if you eat at the restaurant Eureka, money will go to OLL. So look in the newsletter for that. And then eat pizza. We have lots of pizza for those who are here tonight, and welcome to our virtual audience. Thank you, Betty, for coming back.
Thank you for having me back. So, yes, I'm Betty Peralta, and I am a faculty member of the Neuro-Relational Framework, which is this approach to toxic stress. It's a way to assess and reduce toxic stress. What is toxic stress? It is stress that is not healthy. So yes, there's healthy stress. Having stress is actually really important for growth. We cannot grow without having stress. And it gets to a point, however, in our particular society, daily, where it goes beyond what's healthy. And so the neurorelational framework helps us know when is it healthy, when is it not healthy, and how do we reduce it when it's not healthy. And children, a lot of children have toxic stress. And so a nice way to know if children are in toxic stress is watching their behaviors. And if those behaviors, which we call stress responses, if those stress responses are too frequent, too intense, take forever to last, to come back, or if there's difficulty with transitions, or if they're just never in equilibrium, they're just always in a stress response, then we know that it's toxic. And we prioritize their healing of that toxic stress over all else. Oh, it's more important than learning, it's more important than chores. Getting them out of that stress is our number one top priority. We apply this to children with neurodiversity, children who have experienced trauma, and guess what? Like everybody, right? It's just rampant, it's an epidemic. So I'm going to talk with you today about how to reduce, prevent toxic stress in your children. And we start by thinking about some ways that we need to shift our thinking in our society overall. And I spend a lot of time working with schools and teachers and principals in shifting their idea of behavior so that we can respond to it in a way that actually reduces the behavior rather than just smothers it in the moment and then it keeps popping up again. So our first, I turned it off so that I can save the battery. There we go. Our first paradigm shift, inspired by the neurorelational framework, is to change from our status quo of thinking of behavior through a lens of compliance versus non-compliance. So imagine that you go to school, you go to work, you grow up in a world where people are not looking at your behavior as being compliant or not compliant, but instead they're interested in, is your behavior coming from safety? Is your nervous system in safety? Is it in challenge, or is it in threat? And if it's in threat, then we have to do something to reduce that threat so that you stay primarily in safety and challenge. This is the safety, challenge, threat triad. The green is safety. When we have a behavior that is not in harmony with the community or family, then we know that that child is in threat. Whenever a child disconnects from themselves or from you, they are in a threat response. Their nervous system is in a threat response. And that's fine, and that's important that that happens. But can they get back? And can they modulate that threat response so that it's not super intense, that you're not getting this, ear-piercing screaming, for example. That's too intense a stress response. That's not good for anybody, you or the child. So when they're in threat, what we do is we pull back the demands, prioritize relational safety, get them comforted enough so that they can either go back into challenge or straight to safety. And it's absolutely fine. Again, we want threat, we want stress. It's great that they go there. But if they're getting too much of it, then that's what we do, go back. Because we don't want them to spend a long time in threat. The second paradigm shift is that behavior is the status quo, so it's from behavior, bringing behavior into alignment with punishment and reward. So imagine that not only do you have schools, you have homes, you have workplaces. They're not looking at whether you're compliant or not, but that whether your behavior is coming from safety, challenge, or threat, and they're interested in it. If there's too much threat, then they would pull back the demands or collaborate with you to figure out how can you have less stress so that you can stay in challenge or safety. But also that you would not have punishment or reward based on your behavior. You can have reward based on your productivity. You can have reward, based on all kinds of things, but it wouldn't be based on your behavior because your behavior is a stress response. Why would we punish a stress response? Why would we reward not having a stress response? Right? It just creates more stress. That's what happens. And it teaches children how to mask their actual emotions. And when they mask emotions, then we really have a hard time figuring out whether they're in a stress response because they act happy, fine all the time, if they're good at it. Or actually, it's really that we are bad at noticing that a child is actually in stress because it's so convenient when they mask. So we want to move away from punishment and reward because it creates more stress, and that just creates more toxicity. And we want to instead align behavior with connection and boundaries in relationships. That means that we are going to have our boundaries, but that we're going to prioritize connection even though we have our boundaries. We're going to have boundaries, and we're going to say, our connection is more important than all these other things, but I'm not going to give in. Okay, you're not trying to keep your kid happy all the time. You're just providing a boundary, letting them have a stress response, and staying connected with them. So they're not getting punished for their feelings, but they're allowed to have them. And so when you support a child through their feelings, what you do is create resilience. The research shows very clearly that trauma does not happen when an adverse experience happens with support. Trauma happens when there's no support through that adversity. PTSD happens when there's not the emotional support with the adversity. So when a child is having their good feelings, if you're angry with them and annoyed with them and sending them off to their room, that can end up being traumatic depending on the sensitivity of the child and how often that happens, lots of different variables. But if your child has big emotions and you sit there with them and you're like, you can't have your popsicle, but hey, I'm here for you. And they cry and they're frustrated and you're just like, yeah, it's tough. I get this. I felt like this too when I was a kid. Just hang out with that. There's no trauma. Oftentimes, parents are so worried that the stress response is so awful and traumatic that they just give them the popsicle. No need. Give them your attention, your caring. Act like you care even if you don't. Doesn't matter that you don't care, because it's hard to care when you're stressed. You can't. And their screaming is stressful. So don't feel guilty about not caring when your child is acting stressfully to you. It's fine. Just pretend you care. Look at them like, yes, they can probably sniff out that you're faking it, but it's way better to pretend that you care than to just be mad and, disconnect from them. They'd rather that, right? So, connection while you keep your boundaries. Okay, so imagine that children were able to just like go to school, be out in the world where they get to have all their feelings, and people did not get angry with them for having feelings. But they also didn't give in. Okay, picturing this, there's no compliance, non-compliance. It's all about, are you in safety, challenge, or threat? We'll pull back if you're in too much threat, and that's more important than whether or not you do your math. And there's no punishment reward. There's just have all your feelings. And I've got this boundary and I'm not letting it go.
Yeah, can you remind us and give an example of challenge again? What's an example of what you're going to challenge?
It's really hard that I can't have my popsicle. I really want my popsicle, Mom. Honey, dinner is in 5 minutes. We're not having popsicles. I really want it. I'm not in a threat response yet. That's challenge. I'm being challenged by this limit. A threat response is, I really want a popsicle. That's threat. That's not connected anymore. Or shutting down, going off into the room, not talking to anybody. That's threat too. Or anxiety and whining is also a threat. And we'll go over that in a little bit, what a threat response looks like.
This might be a bad question, but is it ever possible that they're trying to manipulate us?
I love it! Everybody has that question. Yes, they might be manipulating you, but they're still in a threat response. Nobody manipulates when they feel safe. So you can't be manipulated if you have your boundaries. And if they have all these feelings around not having a popsicle or whatever it is, they get to practice having feelings. And you get to practice tolerating feelings. So whether they're faking it or not, they're getting really good practice. Crocodile tears are not a problem because we want them to cry. Believe me, you want your kids to cry because if they don't cry, then they're going to have all kinds of other coping mechanisms to avoid those feelings, and those are way worse than crying. Way worse. Crying is awesome. It actually releases the stress chemicals from the body. It just does so many good things. So please love the crying. If it's high-pitched, Loop has a great noise dampening ear thing. Flare is another one. Just make sure you are protected sensorily. But we want emotions. We want emotions. We don't want the shutting down. We want to see things where they would. We want everything out where we can see it, so we can support that. The shutting down is just harder for us to support because when kids shut down and they get quiet and withdraw, then you have to sit there and be really quiet with them. And that's really hard for adults because we just want to talk and fix. And we feel like nothing's happening. So it's just easy for you if they go into that externalizing, and then you can see it, and you're like, yeah, get it out. I know it's a journey for some of us, but you gotta get there. Neurodevelopmentally important for you to get there. So here's what's wrong with the compliance lens of behavior. It's basically one way, your way. So all their thoughts and ideas and reflections on life are squashed. That means that their intelligence and creativity are also being delayed. Because if it's just your way and they don't get, conflict is really important for development. And in a conflict, if they don't get to really explore ideas around how to solve a problem, because it's just your way, you are missing out on huge development, huge. You're taking the intelligence that was in your 2-year-old and reducing it. Because 2-year-olds have more intelligence than 30-year-olds. But we condition it out of them with our authoritarian society. I don't know if you remember what a genius your 2-year-old was. And now you're like, right? I'm just kidding. I'm sure they're all pretty smart. So compliance behavior, the punishment is really like carrot and stick. Punishment reward is like the carrot and stick. You get a stick to stop something, and you get the carrot to get them to do more of it. And we use criticism for sticks, we use losing privileges and timeouts, we use ignoring, and then the rewards are the carrots. Love, appreciation, and approval are carrots. Giving them peace and kindness is a carrot. Well, I'll be nice to you if you behave well, and won't be nice to you if you don't behave well. In the context of a stress response, you're going to remove kindness because your child has a problem that they don't know how to solve. And so they're using this behavior because that's the sophistication of problem solving that they have. Right? It's in a society that doesn't have stress, that's fine. In this society, that's not working for our neurodevelopment, the neurodevelopment of our children. It really works fine in societies that are pretty much stress-free and are really close relationally in huge communities. And one kid gets to, if the mom gets mad, the child gets to run to the hut over here where auntie is and just play with all the cousins. That's fine that you have any kind of parenting. But this now is not okay because we don't have that. We don't have that protective factor. So we have to get better at parenting. We have to get more neuro-smart about parenting. Bribes, sticker charts, marble jars, tangibles are another reward. All of this is more stress piled onto your child because they didn't know how to solve a problem, and you're just putting punishment and reward on the fact that they can solve a problem instead of helping them with their problem, helping them develop the skills to solve their own problems. So instead of this, what this creates is more internalizing. Right? I talked about before, we don't really want kids to withdraw. Internalizers happen when feelings aren't validated. We get pre-pandemic, 1 in 4 girls are self-harming. Now, it's double. And for boys, it was 1 in 10, and now it's 1 in 5. We don't want children to internalize behaviors. What is internalizing is this. We don't want them to be shamed into just feeling sad. That's not really a solution to behavior. It feels like it hormonally in our bodies, because when we scold and the child looks like that, we get a little dopamine hit, because we're mammals. It feels good to get someone to subdue the enemy. It feels good in our bodies. Intellectually, maybe it doesn't feel good to you, and that might win over that hormonal activity, but that's the basics. So chronic remorse leads to children who mask. We don't know what's happening with her. It leads to chronic insecurity. We don't know if she is drinking alcohol. We don't know if she is, suicidal. We don't know if she is looking for partners that abuse her. We don't know what she's doing. We don't know if she's anorexic or bulimic. We want to see the emotion. We want to see that stress. We want to out where we can see it, because then we can support much more easily. Another problem is that when we squash those externalizing behaviors, we make it so that they have to hide their feelings. And so that what happens is they take it out on people smaller or weaker than themselves, because they're looking for a way to release their stress. Bullies are caused by us not allowing those feelings, okay? We are not helping them with their stress, so they're having to look for other ways to relieve it, just like every single one of us has done with our children. It's just biological. If we're stressed, we take it out on people that are smaller than us. It's just what every mammal does. It's not something to feel guilty about, but it is something to work on changing paradigms about. So hidden danger is what happens when we teach children to internalize through rewards and punishment. Does that make sense? Cool. Okay, next paradigm shift. Instead of having expectations of our kids of what we want, there's lots of talk about we have to have expectations that are up here. That's how children reach them. But if you keep doing that and not acknowledging where they are and starting there, then how does that work for children who continuously don't reach that bar and don't know how, because nobody's teaching them how to have that, get to that bar. We're just punishing and rewarding to get to that bar. If you didn't get a math problem right, should you get a punishment? It's the same thing socially. If you didn't get that social thing right, you lied, or you cheated, or you solved your problem in some way that was not socially acceptable. We need to meet where they are and teach where they are in order to get them to the standard that we're looking for. So instead of that, we're going to actually have behavior expectations that are matched to neurodevelopment. This means that when your child is in a threat response, we don't give more stress. When your child is upset, we don't make them more upset by continuously explaining why they should not have a popsicle before dinner. They escalate because we escalate them, because we're not noticing they're in a threat response. Their neurodevelopment, their language centers have shrunken. They can't really hear you very well. They can't really think very well. They don't have access to the top of their brain, that executive system of their brain. They just are not good for that. They're not good for thinking. So when we see our kids are upset or sad, we're not going to continuously put more on them. We're going to pull off. We're going to connect. Get their brain to be full of joy, which is a propeller of development. And that is going to make them do good. That is going to help them grow. That is going to make them be able to hear your lessons much more clearly. We want to get their brains to a place where they can absorb lessons. And we do that not through more stress, but through more joy. So we will talk more about that. This is a book that I don't really recommend, but I'm just giving you the reference because it's kind of dry. The Weirdest People in the World, and WEIRD stands for Western Educated, Industrialized, Rich, and Democratic. And this guy, Joseph Henrich, who wrote this book that explains that most of our human studies are really not about humans at all. It's just about this many humans. 5% of the entire population of the world. So we don't really know that much about the rest of the world, except that there have been plenty of studies showing how we are different. All of the cultures in the world fall somewhere on the spectrum between weird and we call them hunter-gatherers. They do more than that. They also have crops and things, but we call them hunter-gatherers. Indigenous, you can call them indigenous. So everybody falls somewhere along the spectrum of these two totally different cultures. Weird people have a lot in common, and indigenous people around the world have a lot in common. In fact, somebody wrote a book about that called Hunt, Gather, Parent, where she said, this is what indigenous people around the world have in common. And it turns out that the way that hunter-gatherers, our modern-day hunter-gatherers raise children seems to be, because there's so many commonalities, seems to be how we were all wired to be raised, because we were all evolved, raised by hunter-gatherer parents. That's most of our evolution. And here are some differences between weird values and hunter-gatherer values. And I'm not saying this very well. It's really the biases that weird cultures have toward one side versus against the other side, if that makes sense. Because hunter-gatherers value both, but weird values really center around control. We want to have control over our employees, over our children, over our emotions. We want to control. But hunter-gatherers value autonomy over everything else. Like, it's really important to them that when their children are even little, they don't force their children to do things. They work around forcing them. So they work around their children's will. And they have all these different things that they do to work around their will. And this woman, Nicolene de Clough, wrote a whole book about it. Did anybody read it in here? Has anybody heard of Hunt, Gather, Parent? Yeah. Highly recommend. It's a great book. Because every time I tell parents any of these strategies, things just really calm down a lot. Because kids just are primed to get these strategies. It's pretty amazing. So autonomy, children are, allowed to, they don't get baby gates when they start walking. They just have somebody over a certain age follow the kid around at a distance so the child doesn't even know they're being followed. And then when they get into some kind of trouble, they swoop in and save the day, but they, for the most part, stay back. And this happens all over the world. There's so many examples like that. So both cultures value reason, but weird, oh my gosh. If you are a reasonable person, you are superior. If you are an emotional person, you are inferior. If you are showing emotion, you are weak. I don't know if you're catching on, but there's a patriarchy on one side and a matriarchy on the other side. Whereas hunter-gatherer societies have a place for emotion, there's actually value to cry at certain times, to wail at certain times. It's part of how to release the tension from the body. And children are really good at that. We can take a tip. There's urgency for productivity. Time is money. Get your shoes on. I don't have all day. Get them on. Come on, let's go. We gotta get out the door. To go to the park and have fun Right, okay, I get it when there's a doctor's appointment, but we're just like, on the setting of urgency. And we're not even noticing that we don't really have to be urgent all the time. But that's the current. So it's really hard not to be that way. Whereas with hunter-gatherers, everything is just happens in its time. And they actually do things. They do things in the time it takes. So like the way we do laundry, it has to fit in between the important things, but no, they actually sit down and spend the time on the laundry and just focus on that. And everybody around, like the children, are running around and they'll come in and they'll help and then they'll go off and play and they'll come in and help and it's like, this is laundry time. Wouldn't that be nice? Just be able to spend your day doing laundry? Because it really does take a whole day if you've got 4 kids. But we don't do that. Another thing is there's an urgency for development. We're in a really big hurry for our kids to get smart and be adults. And when they misbehave, we don't have a lot of patience for that because we really want them to already be behaving children. Whereas hunter-gatherers expect children to do all of the things children do. They don't expect them to be adults yet. So when they act a certain way, they're just like, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. You're a kid. And then they teach, which we don't do. We don't teach. We just get mad. We believe in having proven facts. Think about times when you felt intuition or inner knowing and you just poo-pooed it and then regretted it later, right? Because that's not valued. And children have a lot of inner knowing that we gloss over and think it's not important, and then later, years later, we'll look back and be like, why didn't I just listen? They were giving me all the signs, Independence versus interdependence. I'm sure you're very familiar with how much we value independence over interdependence. And safety. We are the safest communities in the world, weird societies. And yet, we are the most preoccupied with safety than anywhere in the world. Versus just the risk. Like hunter-gatherers know that it's risky to be alive, and so they're not constantly saying the word careful to their children. They're letting their children experiment with their bodies, climb trees, do the things, and trusting them so that the children learn how to trust themselves and become very competent. And yes, they have accidents, but so do our kids. How many of you have been to the emergency room since you've had children? Okay, productivity versus enjoyment and rest. Y'all already know about this one. Like, who feels guilty? Okay, you don't have to raise your hand, but in your mind, who feels guilty just sitting down? Right? And just like thinking for a little while. That's the thing here. We just don't even want to stop moving because there's so much it feels like we have to do. So children are born hunter-gatherers, okay? We condition them to be weird. And that conditioning can be painful and stressful, which it kind of is, or that conditioning can be, I'm gonna meet you where you are, and I'm gonna slowly guide you into how to navigate this weird world. It doesn't have to be like that, and yet we're in such a hurry. So that's my suggestion. The weird side is really good for the economy. It's important for us to be able to live, in this society. And I mean, I don't want to be a hunter-gatherer. I really like my car. I really like Amazon. I'm sorry, but I do. I love the convenience. It's not that I'm saying throw it out loud. I'm saying it's not good for our nervous system. The other side is good for our nervous systems. So we need to balance better. And there are lots and lots of cultures that balance better. And they've got books about it. France, balance is better than we do. For one, there's a lot of books on France, that's why I use that example. And our systems, including schools, are very weird. and can be very toxic for children who don't fit into that square peg. And so a lot of my work is working with schools to loosen up the weird requirements and think more hunter-gatherer for children so that school isn't quite such a stressful place. So it really doesn't have to be. And you get better academics when you meet children where they are. So let's look at a few things that hunter-gatherer societies have. How do they treat their children? How do they raise their children that protects these children from toxic stress? And this is adapted from that book, Hunt, Gather, Parent, I was telling you about. One of the things is time flow. They don't spend the day saying, okay, now it's time to do this. Hey, no, it's good. Stop that. Now we're going to do this. So transitions are not constant and immediate. The day just kind of flows. Children have a lot of control over how they spend their time. That's why play-based preschools do what they do, because the research shows that allowing children that autonomy and letting them just kind of move through the day is a lot better on their nervous systems, and that means that they learn more. Whatever we do for the nervous system means that they develop better. Quiet companionship or quiet camaraderie. This is something we don't do much. We're constantly talking to our kids. Constantly. We don't feel comfortable with silences in our country. There's no country that is so averse to silences. And our country is really stressful because of it. Okay? Your children can just be doing something, and you can just be with them, and you don't have to be constantly commenting on their picture, or, it doesn't have to be this constant dialogue. You can just sit and be with your kids, and you become less stressful. You become a more relaxing person when you can just be quiet with them and enjoy them, shoulder to shoulder, working together on something without a constant flow of words. I am terrible at this. I'm terrible. I have to pinch the inside of my cheeks, squeeze my toes together to remind myself, hey, just let the child have their experience. I don't need to stick my hand in this. Right? Can they just have their experience? That's better for their nervous systems, better for their intelligence, to be able to be in their experience without you appraising everything they're doing all the time. So that they're like, how is it? Do you like it? Childhood autonomy, we talked about that. They give their children, they let their children decide when they're hungry. So they tend to not have these strict meal times. They'll have dinner, the kids will come in or they won't. When they're hungry, they come in and eat. When it's time to go to sleep, and they feel like sleeping, then the child goes to bed, the parents go to bed, everybody goes to bed when it's time to go when their bodies say it's time to go to bed. And this is what she does at the end of every chapter is tells you how to do this in a modern society. And it's some really cool ideas. In general, Nicolene Clough says, hunter-gatherer communities greatly value a person's right to make their own decisions. They believe it's harmful to control another person. Sometimes when they control another person, that's the only time that they will step in and say, hey, stop that. But other than that, they really are averse to even convincing people of anything. Imagine you just live your life without trying to convince people. I've been trying this for years. It's pretty awesome to just realize, oh, it's not my place to convince them. I'll give them information, but I'm not going to try to convince. It's amazing what it does for your relationships. To give people the freedom to think how they want, including your children. Sometimes I'll go into a home, I do home visits. I'll go into a home and we'll play a game together with the parents, and I'm amazed at how much the parents are trying to tell the child how to be. So the child will say something, oh no, that wasn't kind. It's just constant correcting. in so many homes. That's so stressful. No wonder the child is screaming and hollering and having these big tantrums, because they're letting out the tension from the day of constantly being told what to do. Plenty to play and interact with in unstructured time. We all fantasize about that, right? We just wish we had the kind of neighborhood where the kid could just go out and play. I know. I longed for that, raising my child. Low frequency of reactivity to behavior. I once had this family over in my, I have a little farm, and this little 2-year-old picked up a flower pot and went over to drop it into my pond. And the father was like, "What are you doing?" Just boom, this big voice. And the child just went, you know. I mean, just like not using your voice is so much more stressful. Why couldn't you just run over and then grab the pot and say, "What is that over here?" No, because he was afraid that he would do it again. He was afraid that he would act like a 2-year-old. It scares us that our children act like children because we're afraid that when they're 15, they're going to end up in juvie. Right? Like, that's big fear. My kid is a sociopath. I'm just sure of it. Because they're children, not acting like adults yet. They don't react to behavior because they expect it. What happened? There's a high frequency of behavior instruction. So when behavior isn't good, they allow it, they leave it, they don't talk about it, and then later on, when everybody's just kind of playing or hanging out, they say, "Hey, remember when you did that to your sister? What do you think that might have felt like to your sister?" They ask reflective questions like that. They don't scold, they just kind of like talk about it and let them think about it when their brains have calmed down. At times, when they're not in high stress, and they can actually have these conversations. Now, when you all bring up your children's behaviors, they just go straight into a stress response because of the way you talk about it. But what if you were to talk about it like, instead of saying your behavior was a problem, saying, "You had a problem, didn't you? I wonder what's another way to solve it. Let's think about that. Is there another way that you can handle your sister when she grabs your stuff like that? What can we do? Can I help? What can we think of?" So we're not punishing children for having problems. We're thinking with children about other ways to solve them. So that's all the behavior is. It's just a way to solve a problem.
Any thoughts on when the behavior, or just how to implement this when things go apart, there's kids with other kids?
Yeah.
Don't do.
When we have kids with other, we're at the park, we have kids with other kids. Go ahead.
Just, whether it be the good or bad behavior or instruction on what to do or not to do, like let them work it out, even, when it's in your own confines of your family.
Right, it's different. Here's what I suggest, a hybrid. So in hunter-gatherer land, and in Japan, children just like work it out, and adults stand back, and even if there's a little bit of scuffle, they allow it. That's not gonna fly, right, at the local park. It's just not. So what I suggest, and in preschools, and so what I suggest people do is narrate everybody's experience, both sides' experience. Like, "Oh, you really wanted that truck, and you threw sand at it because you wanted the truck. Oh, what can we do? And when you talk about their experience, you don't have to name their feelings for them. You can just say, that was, that you did not like that. So naming feelings is a whole thing that I can talk about a little bit. But it's really like, I want you to understand where I'm coming from. If you say you're mad, it feels like you're saying you shouldn't be mad to some kids. Like they just don't like you naming their feelings. Like, "I'm not mad. Don't tell me that." you're not really, it doesn't look like you're trying to understand them. It looks like you're trying to control them by telling them how they feel. They don't like it. What they want is for you to get them. They want to feel like you know what's happening in here. So you say, ooh, you just got sand thrown in your face. Oh. And the words don't feel as good as the noises, the feeling, utterances like, oh, man, just got sick. That feels good. And this one's like, ooh, took your truck. Ooh. Feeling felt calms them down and makes them flip up to the executive part of their brain where they can actually think about how to solve the problem. So if you meet them down there, like Dan Siegel calls it the downstairs brain, and you're like, giving the face expressions. If they're yelling at each other, then you get intense too, and you're like, yeah, you did not like that. You get as intense. You're not mirroring the dysfunction. You're just mirroring the feelings behind what's happening so that they can feel like you get them. And that calms them down, and then you're like, hey, just think. And then they'll start thinking. And then you'll start hearing the words. And the co-op was always like, I have an idea. And that could be from anybody here, it could be from anybody across the room running up saying, Miss Betty, I have an idea. They could take turns. And they say, oh, thanks, Matilda. Guys, she has an idea. She says you could take turns. And they say, no, we don't want to take turns. Oh, that was a great idea. I didn't like it. And you go back, what do you guys think? You just take your time with it because this is more important than math. This is more important than reading because this is what's going to make it easier for them to learn math and reading is being able to learn how to regulate emotions and think through social problems. That's what really is the foundation of that intelligence.
I was just going to ask if you can give like a middle school example, like
Yeah.
who's in developmentally, they're trying to roll
Yeah.
eyes at anything you say or do.
Yeah. If you say what they're experiencing, they're all ears. They want to hear this. They don't want to hear any responses to their behaviors. They want to hear responses to their problems that they're using their behaviors to solve at every age. So whatever it is, it's like, school must have really sucked because I can see how your face looks. I'm so sorry. And you get the same look in your body that they have. Yeah. I don't like for you. I don't like this stress for you. I wonder what we can do about it. I wonder if I can help. I'm just wondering how we can deal with this. And you don't worry about a solution right then. You just worry about getting them feeling felt so that the next day you can do it again, and you can do it again until they feel like, okay, I can trust you now to think with you about this problem. They're not going to trust you if you're just talking about their behavior. And it's really hard when they know how to push your buttons and they know just the thing to say to make you feel like the worst mom in the world. It's horrible, and I understand that because they're really good. But if you can just be like, get back into their experience, we mirror that for them, then they can start, first of all, they'll feel really guilty for all that button pushing when they feel they can empathize. And they want you on their team, and so then they want to be on yours. As long as you're talking about their behavior, they just feel shame, and so then they get bravado, and they get the shell on them, and you just can't get anywhere.
Somebody online is asking, how do you separate the child's feeling from the parents? Like, you don't get caught up in all the emotion. Like you model how that emotion needs to be expressed. So you are a unit. So you don't have to be separate people. You are a unit. So your feelings are your kids' feelings. Their feelings are your feelings. That's just how, they're not. But you can experience these feelings together, and that's actually what most cultures around the world do. They don't think about emotions as being inside of people. They think of emotions as relational. So
what you do is you model how to handle emotions. And how do you handle emotions? You express them. And you express them in safe ways that do not hurt the people that you love. So if you're really angry and they're really angry, you say, yeah, let's be angry. And you can take a pillow and hit the couch with it and say, this is what I'm going to do with my anger. What do you want to do with yours? Or you put, I like Lil Boo Thang, the song. I used to put on your whole voice, like, I think you guys doing something like this. And what do you want to do? And you can have an array of options for your children of how they're going to get out these big emotions. And you model a different thing every day. My favorite is Soul Speak. Soul Speak is where you talk with no words. If you use words, you lose. You don't need English to express emotions. I mean, you do as adults, and that's why therapy exists. But children do not need any language to express emotions. So it looks like this. My kid did not empty the dishwasher. I said I was going to do it. I came home, it's there. I don't want to do it, and I'm so frustrated. And now the kid is, doing their homework, and I don't want to interrupt them, but I'm so frustrated. I want them to do it, but I don't want them to stop doing the homework because I don't want them to be tired later, too tired to do their homework. And then now bedtime's going to be pushed back. You know how it is, right? So I'm going to express my emotions so that, one, I am in a better place. My own body and brain are in a better place to deal with this. But two, so that I can model for my child how they can express their emotions when they're upset. Because if I let loose on them, then they're going to let loose on their partner or their children. And if they're not scared of me, they'll let loose on me. So I'm going to go like this. And they laugh. They think it's hilarious. And then there's joy out of your anger. There's nothing serious that needs to be happening when you're angry just because you're angry. All you need to do is get it out. That's the only thing you need to do when you're angry. Then, I feel better. And then I can say, hey, excuse me, do you know what I just said? And my son will be like, I know exactly what you just said. And I said, well, how are we going to not have this happen next time? Because now I'm calm and I can have that reflective conversation. Right? And then he can be like, I am so sorry I spaced it. And we can have a repair. And I can remember that he doesn't have a fully functioning frontal cortex. And actually, I can forget to empty the dishwasher. When you're mad, you don't remember that you also have fallacies, right? You don't remember that. You think you're perfect when you're mad. So just get it out and then enjoy each other. Or get it out and enjoy each other at the same time. Somebody dies in the family, you cry together. Our society tends to try to sidestep these kinds of things because they take time out of our very busy lives, and emotions feel like they're bottomless, and it feels like I'm always going to be crying. If I just start crying, I'm never going to stop. No, it's not true. The crying releases tension. If you cry a lot, it means you have a lot of tension to release. That would be good to get that out, and do it with your children, and talk about it, and have an altar, and really dive into the things. Allow the time that things take to have their time and space, because that's what children need. Children's nervous systems need in order to be healthy, is that they need time spent on the important things. Go to the next one. Learning is play and play is learning. You already know about that. Few commands are given. They don't spend all day telling their children what to do. They just, and when they give a command, it's not like, would you please get your shoes on? Do you want to get your shoes on? It's not a question. It's just get your shoes on. And when they don't do it,
They don't get upset. Because you give a command, your child has to actually process that command and decide to do it. They have to weigh what they're doing with your command. So they're playing and you say, get your shoes on. What we do is, it doesn't happen immediately, like, hey, I said to get your shoes on. Would you please get your shoes on? Rather than recognizing that these are not slaves, these are autonomous human beings who have to make a decision. So it's like, get your shoes on. They don't get their shoes on, and you stand there and wait for them to decide to put their shoes on. It's a mistake to say, get your shoes on, and then take your attention off and go and get yourself ready. Because, oh, I guess it wasn't that important. So you stay, you say, get your shoes on, and they just continue to play, and they act like they didn't even hear you. They heard you, and they feel your eyes on their skin burning a hole. They feel it, and they're still playing, and they're having a hard time because dopamine is keeping them going. And if they don't want to stop that dopamine flow by stopping what they're doing and going to get their shoes on, so you just sit there and wait. And look at them. And allow your eyes to burn that hole. And it could take 30 seconds, okay? Let it take 30 seconds. And if it takes too long, it's, hey, I know. I get that you still want to play. It's hard to let go of that. And then wait a little longer. Raising kids takes time, y'all. I know. It's hard. Lower demand for adult approval, virtually no praise. They don't praise. The best you get from a hunter-gatherer parent when a monumental task has been achieved is this. That's it. That's all you get. But it feels great because it doesn't happen very often. And you get to focus on your own achievement rather than that person's approval of your achievement. Okay, another paradigm shift, number 4, oppositional behavior is a sign of disrespect. Actually, it's nothing to do with you. It's not, nobody's trying to disrespect you with their behavior. It's just not a thing. They weren't even thinking about you. Oppositional behavior is not personal. It is a body budget boundary. What is a body budget? It is what your brain exists for. The whole reason you have a brain, the whole reason the brain evolved was because an organism started to move. And once an organism starts to move, the organism is like, oh, I gotta figure out when to move and when not to move. I need to decide how to save my energy if I need to, or I need to use my energy to get food or more oxygen in the case of one of the first organisms. So you all budget your bodies. Everything you do is budgeting your body, deciding when to use energy and when not to use energy. And let me tell you, y'all need to learn to use less energy and rest more. Everybody needs to rest more in our society, or we're not doing a very good job with our money budgets because there's a rest deficit. But your child is also trying to decide how to budget their body. So just like how much money goes out, how much money comes in, whether to save it or spend it, it's the same thing with your energy. Your brain is doing that all the time in just more and more sophisticated ways. So we increase the body budget capacity by decreasing the allostatic load, or the toxic stress. So when your child has a lot of stress, they're going to have a harder time with transitions. They're going to have a harder time stopping the dopamine. They're going to have a harder time dealing without sugar. They're going to want sugar more because they need more dopamine when they have so much stress. So if you relieve some of that stress, they're going to have more body budget to just like function throughout the day. And
they're gonna have better body budget in order to think better about how to solve their problems rather than just losing it. So it's really stress. This is just all about toxic stress. So we talked about the body budget. This is Linda Feldman Barrett. She wrote 7.5 Lessons of the Brain. She's the one who taught us about the neuroscience around body budgets. And that's the hydra, that animal that only moves to get more oxygen. It's only got a few neurons, and that's the animal that scientists decided brains are for body, budgeting the body. Everything we do is to regulate ourselves. And do we need to regulate to use energy or conserve it? And you might notice some of your children that need to conserve energy, and it's not appropriate for the context, like in school, and they're not doing enough, and that just means they're too stressed. They need less of it, because everybody wants to do everything that the society wants them to do. Everybody does. And the only thing in the way is stress. That's it. Because we are social beings. We are relational. We want your approval. We want, everything to go harmoniously. Only thing in the way is stress. You relieve some of that stress, you're going to get the best behavior in the world. I'm going to stop because I want to take any more questions. I would just have way more slides than is necessary. Are there any questions about anything I've said?
So going back to a few of the, like almost every example I just mentioned earlier tonight, when I was trying to today in our kid, was doing exactly the same thing. I tried to do, I understand that this is a different schedule or routine. Because, well, if you understood, you change it. You're just saying that. And then I get angry, like the,
Yeah.
no, that's me, spiraling. So is the answer to that not to say anything?
Yep.
Okay.
Because you're saying I understand how you feel in order to move through the emotion faster.
Yeah.
But the emotion is getting the tension out. So you move through the emotion, you're not getting the tension out. That's the whole point of the emotion. And it takes time. You don't have to spend every single time getting the emotion out. You can wait. You can just do it every 2 weeks. That's enough, usually. Every 2 weeks, they have a big blow up, let it all out, support them through that. And then, if that's your commitment level. Like that would be the lowest bar every 2 weeks. But it's acceptable. It's still acceptable. But as much as you can, you just celebrate emotion because it's good. It's taking out the stress. And you go for it, you guys. You don't want to avoid the tantrums. Don't walk on eggshells. Go for the tantrum. You want that tantrum. That's going to get everything out. And in your spouses or your parenting partners, when you pussyfoot around things and try not to get them mad because you don't want to bring that up, you don't build their capacity to solve the emotional problems with you. What you want to do is punch them with it, have them have their tantrum, and the tantrum might be, snapping at you or, getting mad. It's good. Just let them do whatever they do. When they get over it, poke the bear again. Get them having tantrums. Let the tantrums fly. As a family, learn how to release that tension without hurting each other emotionally or physically. But you want that emotion. Don't avoid emotion. It's really imperative to our mental and physical health. We need our emotions.
I have 3. My oldest one is very emotionally intelligent and feels everybody and everything in the room. And my younger 2 are crazy and crazier, and their energy can be contagious. And if they are escalating or having the tantrum, she feels it.
Yeah.
And then we all feel it.
Yeah.
And it's hard to, because like, she doesn't need to feel that, right?
Right.
And I don't want her to feel punished or feel
Right.
like it's her fault that she has to remove herself, because that's not fair.
Mhm.
But that's the only way to avoid the contagious crazy.
So what you want to do with that contagious crazy, first of all, is find ways for them to get that emotion out that's fun. Because it's not really fun for them to get that dysregulated, but it is fun to rip up junk mail, have noodle fights, scream into pillow could be good, like all the kinds of things, cathartic things that they can do. Dance party where you just go wild with your body, best, funnest song, you know, find ways for them to get out that frustration. And then you're like, okay, we're gonna solve this, but let's first get the stuff out. You turn on the music, let's go. Okay, is it out? Okay, turn off the music. Okay, let's see what's going on here. What's the problem? How can we think about this? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that she's experiencing emotion in a positive way. But the other thing is, if that can't happen, to talk with her rather than solving that for her, saying, look, I don't want you to have to suffer like this. What do you want to do when this is happening? How do you want to protect yourself? So she might, you know, create a fort in the corner. And like, I'm going to go in here with noise canceling headphones and a flashlight or my glow light. And, you know, she might find ways that it's not a punishment. It's like, ooh, I get to go do this. You know?
Yeah.
But you just like look for, never give children solutions. Always give them the problem and your brain to think with them. And so when you're doing that, they come up with really fun things, and then it's all of a sudden really cool to have problems. Because we're all, you know, together, thinking together, and it feels good to have that connection around problems, you know.
Yeah. The warm, like, I feel like in the summer it's easier.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's just like
No,
me
it's
personally,
true.
but like the
Yeah.
younger ones, like they're happy to like go sprint in the
Yeah.
backyard or go do the front yard, but like it's pitch black at 4:30
Yeah.
and we're all that are crazy.
Yeah, you need a list of indoor things.
Yeah.
That is fun. Like the proprioceptive input, so lying down, putting a cushion, and then having another kid lie on that child can feel really regulating. Like, you know, get an OT book, an occupational therapy book, or a sensory book. And you don't have to have children with sensory issues to really benefit from all those ideas about how to regulate the nervous system.
What if you have a kid that goes from 0 to 100 so quickly, even if they have a bunch of ideas when they're not in threat response,
Yeah.
or what they want to do, but when they're in threat response, there's no way they can access that. And in fact, if you even, if that list is just floating there,
Yeah.
and they see it, they will say no to every single thing.
Yeah.
in that moment.
You just be quiet. You don't try to solve it. You let them have their upset, and you just look at them like the way you're looking at me. You know, as though you're listening to a hard day. They're not using words necessarily, or maybe they are, but you're just listening. And if they say, why won't you da-da-da-da-da, you can say, I'm just waiting for your nervous system to be ready for us to solve this, but right now you're doing what you need to do, so let's wait for that. I don't want to wait, blah, blah, blah. And you're just like, listen, don't repeat yourself ever. Don't assume they didn't hear you, they did. Always avoid giving, you know, old information. Just be like, waiting for it.
9-year-old boys that have careers in the MMA.
Oh, yeah.
I used to get upset and trying to separate and
Good.
all
Stop.
that.
Yeah.
I hang around in the room.
Yeah.
I try to not even like
If
feel
you're,
the emotion.
that's excellent. If you are not afraid of one of them getting the other one into the emergency room, or traumatizing, if you don't have a big power differential with size, then you might just, I would recommend even leaving the room and letting them do whatever they're gonna do. And your uninvolvement is likely to get them to have the tussle and then move up to that executive and start thinking about what to do. Does that feel comfortable?
Yeah, I mean, I've had to do that. And
Yeah.
sometimes they get mad and they're like, you didn't fix this for us.
Yeah, and you say, you're right, I didn't. I trusted you. I had faith that you all could figure this out. And you can also be in the room and say, hey, you want me to help? Okay. What do you feel, what are your ideas so far? What do you want to do?
It's so far past, because they're also 0 to 100 and all that.
Yeah, so you can be like, oh, you feel this way and you feel this way. You just tell them their experience. What? He did what? Oh, and he did that back? Oh my gosh. You know, you show them that you get it, and that calms them. You get loud, they get calm. Anybody else?
Please tell everyone the 30% rule.
Oh yeah, I gotta do that. Before I call on you, I just have to say, Entronic researcher on relationships found that secure attachment happens not because a parent is perfect. In fact, he found that parents are out of sync with their children. There's a mismatch between what the child needs emotionally and what the parents are giving 70% of the time. Only 30% is the average relationship, either with child or between adults. 30% of the time are we on the same page. The difference between a secure and insecure attachment is the commitment to making the repair when we're off. So when you say, you must have been really upset about that, and you get, no, I wasn't, that's a mismatch. And you're like, oh, sorry, I misunderstood, tell me more. That's the repair. You only have to meet a child's need 30% of the time, and then you just repair when things mess up. It's fine. And that repair actually creates a stronger relationship. Being perfect does not build trust. It does not build resilience. Being imperfect, plus the willingness to do the work of checking in and connecting and getting corrected, that is what builds trust. Okay, thank you, Jane. What's your question? Do you still have it?
Yeah, my son has always had like a sensory issue with around food, and it just create a lot of tantrums, and then we've gone through so many different things, and finally, he kind of explained to me recently. I asked him about the inside of his mouth, and he goes, it all hurts. And I was like, oh. I was like, so you don't care about color? He's like, no. I like purple, green, orange. He goes, is how soft it is. And I was like, whoa. Like, this is the problem. So I felt like I hit the jackpot. I was like, okay, can you tell me more about that? Foods. I was like, okay, so we're gonna stick to this, and then we can have nice dinners. And he was like, yeah. So it was like good. I felt like I hit the jackpot. But after a couple weeks, it was like I gave him beans. Baked beans in that ballpark,
Yeah.
and it was just like meltdown city, and then it was like all that again. And I was like, do I
That's-
have to keep going back? But I don't understand.
That is not about the beans.
I was like,
That was an opportunity to release the tension that has been built up from all the other problems that his nervous system has been having.
yeah.
So that's just, oh, you having a meltdown? That's because that's your nervous system's medicine, is to release that tension. Allow it, and then afterwards say, so, no beans? Okay, no beans, got it.
Yeah, and that's where I'm like, I don't know if I should say like his vegetables are extra hard for most of you, and I finally was like, you can choose any vegetable you want. Just like pick whatever you want. And that's like seems to be okay, but it'd be nice if you like I eat vegetables, or I'm like, or I just like ungather it and be like, I don't really care, I just got one. And just be fine with that.
Yeah, well, it sounds like the pain is serious, and pretty much any vegetable
can be mush if that's what he wants. He likes it that way, you know? And is he willing to try any vegetable that's mushy?
He's like, I have peas, and I'm like, okay.
So this is another example where you don't want to give them the solution, you want to give them the problem, and you just keep bringing it up in small doses. Dose the challenge. We don't want to push him into threat. So it's like, hey, I want you to eat more vegetables. You don't like vegetables. What should we do? And then he's like, I don't know. I don't care. And you say, I do. And you just be quiet and look at him. Your eyes have actual lasers that burn holes into the skin. Like they don't like it. So just like look at him. And then if it gets to an uncomfortable point where you feel like he's going into threat, it's like, okay, well, we'll talk about it again tomorrow. Think about it. Think about a vegetable you'd be willing to try mushy. And just keep on bringing it up. This is the problem. What do you think we can do? Let me know if you want some ideas. Don't give them solutions. None of your solutions are ever going to be any good. Okay, any other questions? This is my website. You can subscribe to it if you want to know what's happening with the Neurorelation Framework. You can contact me through my website if you have any questions. I love questions. I have a blog on there. We're about to have a podcast eventually. We feel like there's bandwidth.
Thank you, Betty.
Thank you so much.